Hello and welcome to Escape Radio for September 3rd, 2020. I'm Frankie Aki. There's a current that runs through each of the works I want to talk to you about today, and it is will, as in the will of a person to leave the past behind, or the will of a people to forge on despite devastating hardship, or the will of a man to sacrifice for the good of his family. So with that in mind, let's get into it. This week's album is Reliever by William Prince. If you're an admirer of greats like Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson, and Sturgill Simpson, then you should check out William Prince. He's a Canadian country artist from Selkirk, Manitoba, and Reliever was preceded by Prince's first studio album, Earthly Days, from 2015. Beginning with The Spark and ending with The Great Wide Open, these are songs that get to the point, that cut to the chase. No build-up, just what comes from the heart. This is an artist who is committed to bringing to his work the best of himself, to counter the gravity of life. He brings to his music his values, his influences, and what he knows. Perhaps Prince is a man who's made mistakes and is trying to learn from them and do better. Someone who's trying to take stock of his life and stay out of trouble, if only for the sake of his loved ones. A guy who's gone on a journey in which he's slowly but surely learned how to live. Life lessons learned not from instruction, but from living, with a growing awareness of his mortality. This album marks yet another benchmark in this artist's life, at which he takes time to look back and see how far he's come.
If you look me in the eyes, if you look me in the eyes, I say now, don't be afraid of the fire.
As you can hear, Prince has a large patriarchal voice with a real commitment to words. A traveled soul that's lived 1,000 lives, the voice of generations and millennia of common human experience. A variety of crafty melodies married to the lyrics of a rich heart and soul. A guy who's trying to get his footing before carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. Maybe holding on to the idea that it's not where you start in life, but where you end up. And even when things are at their best, there's a little fear inside you that all the progress you made can be erased at any time by some hand of fate. William Prince doesn't just tell stories with these down-to-earth folksy songs, but he creates a character as well. Whether that character is real or something Prince has created through his work doesn't really matter, because nonetheless the character speaks to us, to who we are, what we've lived, and where we're going, with an emphasis on honoring the past, even if there's no opportunity in it, treating it as what it is, a part of one's life and legacy, both the good and the bad of it. Reliever was released by William Prince Music on February 7th, 2020. And here's one more from Reliever.
Like living with a loaded gun, living with a loaded gun, so let's have a tick, talk about.
The single for this week is We'll All Be Alright by Amy Stroup. Amy Stroup is an artist out of Nashville whose songs have been featured on some popular TV shows like The Walking Dead, Parenthood, and Grey's Anatomy. A new song for the dawn of a new day, a new artist for a new time. We'll All Be Alright was actually released in 2019, so a lot of the meaning I'm going to read into it is because you might think of this song as being sent to us from the past. The spirit and soul of art is eternal, and its truth transcends time. This cathartic little song is a gift from the recent past with the feeling and energy of a time when things were better. But these things will pass. They have in the past and they will again. This is not only a song for the moment, but also one that looks beyond it. A whisper in the night seeking calm and normality. A return to the stability of American life you and I once knew, but this time for everyone. We can't taste it yet, but we can already smell it a bit off in the distance. A promise that indeed will all be all right. A song about an unstoppable, albeit quiet, will and determination. This song is an expression of humanity's tireless thrust towards the horizon, always dreaming of something beyond our grasp, but which we know is possible and attainable. We'll All Be Alright was released on November 14th, 2019 by Milk Glass. Shout out to a cool cat named Ari out in Virginia who suggested this song to me. And here's a little bit from We'll All Be Alright. The feature for this week is The Wild Goose Lake, directed by Diao. The Wild Goose Lake is an intriguing, absorbing crime drama out of China, and the first thing that struck me about the film was the seductive cinematography. I'm not sure who Diao's influences are, but there are hints of Hitchcock, Tarantino, and Scorsese in here. This film offers us something too rare these days: an intricately structured, detail-oriented action film, one that balances depth with depth, so that the action is dramatic and meaningful rather than shocking and pornographic. This film has its peaks and valleys, but it doesn't skew either way. It's well balanced, disciplined, and it's a fluid story that builds and builds and builds until it pays off. You might say this is a crime drama about love. The film has a love affair at its center between a fugitive gangster and the stranger who helps him hide from the police. What we take for betrayal one moment, we realize is love the next. There's a great blend here between the elements of action and adventure, love story, and crime drama. The film is quite violent and graphic, however not without necessity. This film tells a rather twisted story based on true events, and it's carefully tempered. The blood and gore in this film serve to lay the ground for our characters' conflicts, and, as frequent as they may be, they're still used somewhat sparingly, so as not to cheapen a film that has abstract themes at its core. It's set in a lawless criminal underworld, in which regular people are subjected to horror and violence simply because they weren't able to escape poverty. Their children grow up only knowing crime and desperation, their lives made an utter waste for the benefit and profit of just a few hoodlums. In a different life, our protagonist would have been a prince or a king. Here, things go sideways with a rival gang, and he pays the ultimate price for it. But he wants to do one thing before losing his freedom. He wants to make sure his wife and kid are taken care of. And you have to watch this film to see how that plays out. The Wild Goose Lake was released in China in 2019 and in the US on March 20th, 2020. Since the film is in Chinese, a clip might not be ideal for an English audience, so instead, here's a little bit of music from The Wild Goose Lake. Find this film, I know you'll like it. In closing, this episode is dedicated to Chadwick Boseman, one of the great talents in today's cinema who left us too soon at the top of his game. A movie I really enjoyed seeing him in was 2017's Marshall, about a case in the early career of Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall. And this week, when I watched The Wild Goose Lake, I couldn't help but think that this was the kind of role Chadwick Boseman would have been great in. I imagine that sometime between his early days at Howard University and his time in the theater in New York City, a new man was born, a performer, a curious mind, and some might say a king. He was a leading man for our time, and his passing is a true loss for all of us. Chadwick Boseman will now live in the hearts of his family and friends, and he will live in the movies forever. Thank you for joining me. I'll talk to you next week.